Okay, I'm going to make my starter for our rosemary bread. And what we'll do here is we've got a cup of water between 90 and 100 degrees. We then have a half a teaspoon of yeast, and this can be Flashman's, Red Star, instant, regular, whatever. So we'll mix that up together, the water and the yeast. Quarter cup whole wheat, and 1 1/4 cups flour. Mix it up. Then I'm going to cover it with plastic and let it sit between 6 and 12 hours as a starter. And it can just be placed on the counter, covered with plastic wrap. Okay, it's all coming together in a ball. Okay, that's good. All right, I'm going to cover this with plastic wrap and come back to it tomorrow to mix our bread dough. Okay, so I've got my starter, and you can see it. Let me tilt it. It's pretty loose, but you see all the bubbles going on. There's bubbles, and you'll see them pop. That lets you know your yeast is working. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make our actual dough. First thing we do is that we stir this down just a little bit. Okay. And then we are going to add all at once. Yeah, it's really sticky. We are going to add all at once about 2 teaspoons of salt. You can add anywhere from 1 1/4 up to 2 1/4. So I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of salt, tablespoon of sugar, and then we have 390 grams of flour, and then I have 3/4 teaspoon of active yeast. If you're using instant, it would be a half a teaspoon. I'm going to add it to my 1 cup of warm water, which is about 100 to 110, and I'm going to dissolve it first, the yeast first, into my water, just to get it completely dispersed in the liquid. And I like using filtered water to make my bread, and I also check the temperature of my water with my instant read thermometer. Okay, now we're going to add the water and the yeast, the water infused yeast. And now we're going to mix the dough all together. What we want to do is get everything, all the flour taken up. We want the flour all taken up by the dough. Hold this. As you can see, what we're getting here is a pretty shaggy dough. It is still pretty wet and pretty loose and sticky, but that's good. Okay, clean my fingers off, and now we're going to let it rest for about 15 minutes. And letting it rest before we do any kneading allows for the moisture to take up all the flour. And we'll give it another couple of stirs within this 12 to 15 minutes, and that just helps the dough again pick up all the flour, lets the flour swell with the moisture. It adds in just the cohesion of the dough, and it also will allow you, when you're kneading, to use less flour. It'll come together quicker. Okay, be back in 15. Okay, we're almost ready to turn out our dough and start kneading, but I wanted to show you how to peel the leaves off of a rosemary stem. So get your fingers down to the stem and then just pull it. And see, it just strips the leaves right off of it. Also, then you can just pick off the very top. This is my favorite thing for chopping up my herbs. It's just a little block of wood with a hollowed half a moon shape in the center and a rocker arm blade, and you just rock it back and forth and chop it up. You want to chop this pretty fine because you don't want huge leaves of rosemary in your bread. You want this to flavor and scent the bread, but you don't want to bite into some huge leaf of rosemary. That would just spoil the whole bite. So, okay. So just rock it back and forth. All right. You can see it's pretty fine. Now, I like using a pastry cloth for any of my pastry, whether it's bread dough or pie crust, whatever. But I like this because it doesn't stick. I'm going to sprinkle rosemary here, and then just a little bit more flour. You can add up to a half to maybe 3/4 of a cup more flour. All right, so now we're going to turn out our sticky dough. As you can see, it's pretty sticky, stringy. That's good. So now you have strands of gluten going on. So there we go. I think we're going to end up probably adding all of that flour. I'm going to get some water run a little bit in here so that it doesn't turn into a brick. Okay, and now we're going to knead this dough for about 10-15 minutes. I'm going to fold and push away with the heels of your hand. And as I do this, I'm just taking up all the rosemary and closing it inside to the dough. If it starts sticking, add a little bit more flour. Okay, so we have a nice round elastic loaf here. And now what I'm going to do is we're going to place this into a greased bowl. Right here, it's lightly greased. Put this in here. I'm going to cover this with plastic wrap, put it in a warm place, let it rise for about 2 hours or so. And then we'll bake it. Okay, see you in a couple hours. Okay, here's our bread. It's been on the rise for almost 3 hours now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tip it into this parchment-lined cast iron Dutch oven here. But first, I'm going to sprinkle it, dust it with some durum semolina flour. If you don't have durum semolina, just use cornmeal. That works just as well. And I'm going to turn it in here, and then I'm going to cover it with a lightly greased clear plastic wrap. I'll do it with a paper towel that I've soaked a little bit in vegetable oil, and then we'll let it sit for another 90 minutes, then we'll bake it. Okay, I switched out my bread into this bowl so I could preheat the Dutch oven. I'm going to get it, bring it over here, then we'll transfer the bread and then into the oven. Super hot. Super hot. Okay. Plastic comes off. Uh-oh. Got a little stuck when I transferred it. Bummer. Okay, and we go into the Dutch oven. Slash the top with my little gadget. Now my oven is preheated to 475. As soon as I put this in, I'm going to turn the oven down to 450, and then every few minutes for the first 15 minutes I'm going to spritz the top of the bread. And what this does is this helps the bread form a nice crust. Okay, so in the oven, it'll be in there for at least 25-35 minutes. We'll just check it. As we go, we need to reach an internal temperature of 190. Okay, thanks. See you in a bit. Bye. Okay, it's time to get the bread out. Oof, very heavy. There we go. Let's put this back here and shut this. Here we are. Hot, hot. Yep, sounds good. Let me get my thermometer, my instant read. Let's check out our internal. Yep, our internal says 192, so we want at least the 190. So there's our bread. We'll let it cool completely, and then I'll take a picture of it after I cut it so you can see what the inside looks like. Okay, bye for now. Okay, just a few tips. Number 1, plant your rosemary in full sun. Number 2, don't overwater it. Number 3, do mulch, and mulch to at least 4 to 5 inches, whether you use pine bark mulch or leaves or pine straw, but do mulch. On your bread, make sure that you use fresh yeast. That's the most important thing on your bread. Make sure you use fresh yeast. And on your flour, put bay leaves in your flour. It discourages weevils, which will get into your flour, and put it in every single bit of flour that you have. I've never had a problem with cornmeal, but all the rest of the flours you need to put a bay leaf in. So that's it. See you next time. Bye.